Hello, welcome back to my YouTube. I am Matt. We are back for another Masterclass series episode on Terapagos this time with Sempra, who has kindly agreed to join the channel. Why don't you introduce yourself, Sempra, and then we will get stuck into why you want to talk about Terapagos.
What's up, y'all? My name's Sempra. I won my first event early on in Vancouver. I did pretty good at the World Championships, and then I took a little bit of a break. Still playing online. I still love this game, so I'm really happy to be on. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, thank you for joining, man. So we'll get straight into it and talk about what makes Pagos good. It's a very complicated mon, so there's a lot
Very
to
complicated.
it. Why don't you
Yeah.
tell people why this mon is good?
I think the easiest thing is it's two things. Firstly, the matchups are the matchups are just pretty good across the board compared to every other restricted. I think the thing you'll see with other restrictions is, especially the top restricted, Zama, Maridon, Calyx Shadow, is they'll have some really good matchups. That's why they're best restricted. And then they'll have one or two really poor matchups, which is just like almost auto loss. If they have the right Pokemon, it's just almost unwinnable. You can try your best, but gotta get pretty lucky. I think the nice thing with Pagos is it doesn't have any exceptional matchups. Like no matchups are just super easy. Shadow is pretty easy. That's a pretty easy matchup, of course. Other than that, like there's no free matchups. At the same time, there's no auto loss. I think with the exception of maybe like Lunala. Lunala's kind of hard, but I think without Lunala, it's a really consistent mod. And the thing about consistency is you get really good at a team. You get to a really high level. If you can be consistent over and over again, it just means that you can win any matchup. Like I think Pagos, a lot of the matchups that you look at, it'll be 55% in the Pagos player's favor, 45 in the other player, and like that's just enough for most good players to just capitalize on that advantage and just win. I guess the other very big thing is uh, it's just very under prep for compared to the rest of the higher level restricteds. For example, what does this mean? Instant started dropping uh, Flare Blitz for Wiz. Why was that? That was because of Zama, because of Kali Ice. We have other Pokemon like Maridon. People do this just for a Rillaboom, just for that Maridon check. It's a really effective Maridon check. And then you have, of course, Calyx Shadow. This is an infamous one. It has phases where it goes through really high usage. It just takes events, and then people go back to running double dark. Everyone just runs double dark, and now it's terrible again. I think the major exception to that rule is Pagos, where there's not really a check to a Pokemon that has a neutral move, right? Like Starstorm is neutral into everything. Worst case scenario, they're doing super effective into you, but the way these teams are set up, you have Fake Out, you have Redirection, you have Intimidate, you have a lot of Fake Out, and so you kind of set yourself up to almost cover all angles. It's kind of up to you as the Pagos player to then play effectively, which is some people aren't willing to do that. Completely fine, I understand. However, if you're looking for a team without terrible matchups, with a pretty good matchup spread across the board, and you're willing to put in the effort to play better, Pagos is really good.
Yeah, for sure. I think we were talking earlier. You said sort of it does play quite linear, especially obviously the Carmine one in particular, which is the most common one at the moment. But yeah, linear is not necessarily
Yeah,
a
like
bad thing. It's just that it's a high skill
exactly,
thing. You have to be able to consistently pull it off, and
exactly.
yeah, very
I
board
think the
aware.
amazingness of the linearity thing is you learn the same matchups over and over again. Like I'll tell you, the most common lead. This is maybe 80% of games, maybe 85 if you're pushing it. It'll just be Pagos lead with Instant, Rilla, Ogerpon. Maybe a switch up of the lead. Like sometimes Rilla leads, sometimes Ogerpon leads. Other than that, you're just leading those four, playing with those four nearly every time. And this is where it being linear doesn't really matter. You're playing the same four Pokemon over again. Eventually, you get so good at the matchup, you don't have to make hard reads or calls. You just understand the board position and where it'll end up. After your many games of playing with the same four Pokemon, you just kind of the board positions open up. Especially because again, with Terra Starstorm, unlike every other move, you can't really resist it. There's nothing that really checks it. You kind of just have to take it. And once again, as a Pagos player, that's really really good for you because you get rewarded in the end for setting up all those combines with the fact that you can hit anything on the board. So
Absolutely.
I think it's just very strong in a lot of matchups. There's
Yeah.
very few matchups we dropped it.
Yeah, and also like both the abilities are just incredible. Like Terra Shell, like obviously helps keep it alive. It's so easy to restore, especially if it's bulk
Right.
all support pieces. And then when it terrestrializes and you just remove terrain, weather, like you say, it just really helps it be neutral into pretty much everything. Like it's really impressive. I would say it's quite high skill level mon. I don't think you can pick it up and immediately be really good with it. Would you agree with that?
Like expect to lose games the first time you pick it up. It's difficult to learn because again it's so linear. You kind of just have to know exactly where you're. Like you got to read the board turns in advance. I think the interesting thing has been, for example, learning on highlighter how to play against Encore Disable with a Calm Mind Mon. And learning that I can take an Encore this turn and I'll be good. I can take a Disable this turn. I think just learning that. After that, it kind of becomes like just a math game. Like if you know where your game plan is, there's been so many games I've been playing with my friends who've been running Pagos. You just say turn one, like I won the game. Like it's gonna take me a couple turns. It's gonna take me a lot of fake outs. It's gonna take me a lot of protects. It's gonna take forever. Might get the time, but I've already won turn one. Just because when you know your win condition, for example, a lot of the win condition is super simple. Just get up Calm Mind. Get up Calm Mind without taking too much damage. Usually that's just enough to win the game. If you can do that effectively, with an effective lead, if you don't lose a Pokemon turn one, you don't lose crazy positioning turn one. You can a lot of time you can just win the game turn one just by setting up a Calm Mind. So I think it's really cool how there's a mon like that.
Yeah.
In a restricted format, like sometimes feels kind of volatile. Like Pagos is really stable, really stable.
Yeah. I think and like ways you describe it that way, it sounds like really rewarding to play. Like I'm a Miraidon player, so like I've not really played much Pagos, but it sounds like once you put the effort in, you get the results. Like it's really a rewarding archetype to play.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of the best way to play. It's a rewarding archetype to play. It's very rewarding. It's just good Pokemon. It's learnable win conditions. Like I wouldn't say it's terribly impossible to learn Pagos, but once you learn, like, it's kind of easier said than done. It's really easy to say, oh, you click fake out and then parting shot, and then U-turn and parting shot and fake out. It's a lot harder to actually do all that. I guess one of the things is staying focused through 20 minutes of the game.
Yeah.
Playing through that. Yeah, no, it is.
Yeah,
it's not It's not impossible.
Yeah.
Sorry, someone's at the door.
No, that's cool, man. We're just going to look at some of its notable results now. Obviously, it's only been legal for one regulation. We've had the regulation twice, but it's only been legal for one. It has evolved a bit through its existence so far. So there was like the early days with hyper offense, with Chiyu or Tornado. So it'll be usually Tailwind, and then the more hyper offensive pieces like both the Stockholm teams here. Hyper offense, and you've got Aurelian NAIC was a hyper offense variant, but you can see the Calm Mind one started to pop up as well. And then obviously this was really a one-off, but in Japan that's its only win, Japan Nationals, was the Meteor Beam set, which is it's not common, especially in open sheets. That's day one closed sheet tournament, and then day two open sheets, and that was a really unique team. It didn't really catch on. Like Humor, who won it, did come ninth at Worlds, but was Calm Mind by the time it came to Worlds, despite the fact the team looks broadly similar. It's just a flat main over. What have we got there? We've got the one change, the Insin over the Iron Hands, which is it's another balance piece really. A lot of the consistent results, especially the results in the current iteration of XG, are the Calm Mind version.
I think as the meta started centralizing a little bit more, this usually happens with restricted formats. As we kind of figured out what the top 5, top 10 Pokemon are, the best Pagos build kind of got clearer, and I think it's just Calm Mind. Specs was used early. I remember at the start we had max speed Pagos teams just so you could speed the Urshifu. The Meteor Beam sets are kind of a thing. Specs Pagos was probably the most common most common secondary archetype to the Combine archetype, which I think is just the best right now. It's really really consistent. You have the best Pokemon in the format. I'd say like you bring Ogerpon, Incineroar, Fluttermane. They're just really easy to play with. They're really strong, and we've kind of optimized it to a point where we kind of know that it's the best we have, right? Everyone's been playing Bold. Everyone's been playing slower Pagos. You know, we've been playing Rocky Helmet Incin with the that also goes plus defense. I forgot what the nature is, Impish. But all that to say that when you take all that into account, I think the best Pagos build is just it's kind of clear. It's the Combine build, and I don't think it's terribly hard to move over your experience. Like I'm not trying to shut down the Specs Pagos players. Like your team is terrible. Firstly, I think the gameplay is very similar. Like switching to the Combine version is not terribly hard to do. And secondly, like I don't think it's the Specs version that's bad or any of the other versions that are bad. I just think it's the Combine version that's super optimized. Like it's just too good. There's, you know, it's kind of hard to make improvements on something that's already so good. So
yeah, no, for sure.
I think Combine is the way to go.
Yeah, I think we sort of discussed a little bit before the call. Like the Specs and Medial Beam Jets probably. Like they probably exist in closed sheet tours, but like open sheet tours, should I say? But they're closed. They do still shine in closed sheets. You can still get blown up by a Specs Pegos in the GC, something like that.
For sure, yeah. Yeah, like it's useful. It's just like
why use the worst version?
We've learned. Yeah, exactly. At this point, we've learned you want to cover the most matchups. You want to have the best team. It's probably just gonna be Combine. Also, like the other thing to note, I guess, is around the time that Pagos was being used in with the Specs and all that, I remember like NAIC, it really popped up. It got second, I think.
Yeah.
It was also a time where an Incin just wasn't being used. Like people were. I remember this was like Taunt Chiyu, Wisp Chiyu. Around that time, people did not want to use Incin. And then come around World's time, come around of course now, very similar metas. The mod is really really good again, and I think the setup version is probably one of the only versions that doesn't really take a hit versus it. We were talking about this. You click Combine, you get 2 stat boosts. People forget about this. It's not just 1, it's 2. So you click Parting Shot, you're still net positive as Pagos. You have not. The instant doesn't touch the Terra Shell with Parting. You keep your leftovers. You have a +1 in special defense. Overall, the board position has only gotten better for you. Whereas Specs versions, the Media Beam versions, they kind of have weaknesses in. Like the Specs version just gets Parting farmed. It's just so easy to do that. And then the Media Beam version, the weakness of that is you have to tear to catch the Oko on the instance. Otherwise, it's not a stab Media Beam, and you have one chance to both hit a 90% move, and also you kind of have to hit the correct slot. If you swap a Rilla in, well, guess what's happening now? You're getting Fake Out cycled, you're getting Party cycled. It's not going to be a fun time.
For sure.
I think Calm Mind is the only version where you don't really care about that. Like you can go ahead and do what you want. I'm still gonna get board value taking Party shots, which is something that the other Pagos versions can't really do.
Absolutely, and like even like the Calm Mind version, like it's become incredibly optimized, but like that has developed. Like if we look at I think the top of the world's placings, you look at Kuma's team, the Japan national champion. You've got the very much standard Incin, Rilla, Ursh, Flutter, Ogerpon, Terapagos, but because like you say, like you were saying that you really only bring Incin, Rilla, Pegos, and Ogerpon usually. Like there are space to tack on certain ones, and I think now it's like I think the current one is Heatran or Screamtail, and this one Sikikot's team from EYC just gone has both Heatran and Screamtail, but you've still got Ogerpon and Incin and Rilla and the Terapagos.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then like you said, you can even take a choice of. I think a lot of people are forcing themselves to use Screamtail. It's not a mod for everyone. You can also just use Top Flutter, Two-Way Flutter for similar results. The Urshifu Flutter version is also really good. It's easier to play as well. So I think it's up to you. I like the Heatran version because it probably has the most solid Zawa matchup. The Zawa matchup is actually really good, and in that matchup, like Heatran kind of becomes zero restricted, where you drop the Pagos. You don't have to necessarily, but you're not going to tear it more than likely. The Heatran becomes your game plan, and you kind of put your Terra into it. You play off of it. So I
Absolutely.
think they have the strengths and weaknesses. I think Heatran takes a lot more time to learn because it's kind of a weird mod, especially because we're running like heavy slant earth power. Kind of weird, but
Yeah.
once you get down to it, like it makes sense why you'd want them on. Like, for the rest of what's the archetype like the rest of Pagos, it doesn't have a very good Flutter Chi matchup. Heatran it just fries them both. You Oko the Flutter, you kind of keep the Chi on the field doing nothing. So
Absolutely. Yeah. No. It's like you say. It's interesting that you can sort of fill out that core and then use the sort of flex bots, sort
exactly,
of like
exactly that.
for whatever you feel least comfortable into. Like you might feel like you can beat Zama without Hedron, so therefore you
Exactly,
don't
yes.
need Hedron.
And then
But
you could hit an Ursha. Um, right, and then I think the Overpunch set also kind of depends on what the other two are. The most common, like you were saying, is the Hearthflame,
yeah,
but you wouldn't really run a Heatran on the Hearthflame version. If you want to run a Heatran, I think that sticks to Rock. Otherwise, like Heatran Hearthflame instant is kind of it's super redundant. You already
yeah,
don't have like the best Urshifu matchup, even if you're running bold Pagos and all that. It's
yeah,
still not the greatest matchup.
yeah.
So
You don't want to make yourself weaker to Urshifu. That's never a good
exactly,
thing. Um,
exactly.
Absolutely. And then we want to just talk about. So this is like a really important thing when it is such a complicated one. Like, what are your maybe like your top 3 or 4 points on piloting Pagos? How do you get good value from the turtle?
I think the general tip with the mon is you probably want to be combining far more than your Star Stormer. The issue with the mon is this is probably the only major issue it has. You only have 8 attacks in total, unless you're running Earth Power, which is less common now. You have a total of 8 Star Storms. So I think the biggest tip is you have to be very mindful with your Star Storm usage. You should know um, the risks of clicking Star Storm on a turn where they can protect, you can lose momentum. You have to be very uh, specific about the turns you click Star Storm. There's a couple of calcs that are useful for that too. For example, knowing that at +1 Urshifu always dies to a single target Star Storm, but when you Terra, you don't get that Oko anymore. Um, Being aware of -1 Urshifu also gets Oko to that same Star Storm. Um, I think the biggest thing is clicking Calm Mind as often as you can. Like I'd almost get greedy with the move. It's a move. Pagos is a Pokemon where it's kind of hard to, like we said, just take it out the game turn one because of Terra Shell, because of you have so many partners assisting it. You can get greedy with Calm Mind because Punishers are very they're not you know a turn where you get punished for clicking Calm Mind is just not detrimental enough to deter you from clicking it. It's too good of a move. Pagos doesn't have enough special defense on its own, so you click that Calm Mind, you basically give yourself 8 specs and an AD at the same time, and then you can click Star Storm. I think like feel free to click it after +1, but make sure you have your Calm Mind boost up. And I guess the other thing is the forms of Pagos are harder to work with than you realize, right? Uh, it can get really easy to mix up the calcs, like we were saying. Single target Starstorm off of the baby Pagos is more damage than a single target of you know the spread Starstorm. So being aware of that, I think remembering the Tear Shell is a really good ability, and the one way it gets used really commonly on these Rillaboom teams, you can get your Tear Shell back. Like that's a really underused tip. People don't they don't try to conserve their Terra Shell. If you are at +2 and you're at 75% HP, it is completely reasonable to just like click protect and then fake out or follow me and just recover that HP back just to get into full HP for the baby Pagos. That's a really effective strategy, and I guess a lot of opponents don't really see that as a line, right? A lot of people think that when you click fake out into it, that's kind of it. I've dealt with Terra Shell. Just remembering that you can take a psychic Farigiraf or a Dazzling Gleam for a Farigiraf, even a Moonblast with enough Palm Mines, and then go back to your Terra Shell. So when you're selecting turns, when you're, of course, you have to be very precise with Pagos. When you're doing that precision, remembering that, how many turns will I get my Terra Shell back in? It's very, very useful to keep in mind. And I think the last thing is you have to be very, 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 very careful with when you Terra your Pagos. Like, you have to have a pretty solid war position to want to click it. You either have to have really easy connection to both slots to click it. They've already clicked Protect into one of the slots and the other one doesn't have Protect. Then you can Starstorm. Or, their team doesn't have Wide Guard. Being aware of the Wide Guards on their team and their bench before you click Starstorm. And then, of course, like, the simplest thing, make sure your Terra Shell gets broken before you click, Big Four. It's just too good. It's like having two different Pokemon at the same time. So just playing around your ability, I think the most important thing is, and then keeping in mind that Starstorm is 8 attacks, so you should be clicking Calm Mind as much as you can. That's kind of your primary attack.
Yeah, for sure. And then, are there matchups where you really just you're not even worried about terroring? Like you use your terror on your Ogerpon or something instead of that?
Oh, good question. I think Dozo is actually one of them, where I'd almost never terror the Pagos, but it can be useful, right? Like I think it's I think it's Dozo. I normally use something like Heatran to trap the potential. Usually it's Weezing. You can trap the Weezing on the field. That's really useful. But I like in the back it's really strong because they go into Dozo, and just stem fake out Starstorm, single target. It's really good damage, and like they're clicking Wave Crash. It's not very effective into your Pagos. You'll recover your Terra Shell off of I think two turns of Grassy Terrain and leftovers. It just ends up being just good enough to stall out Dozo. I think that's a big matchup. I think the other thing I keep in mind, I think Zama I wouldn't bring it. I think those are the two major, the two matchups where Pagos isn't your main game plan. I think Zama and Dozo.
For sure. No, that's really helpful, and I'm sure people really appreciate that sort of piloting advice. It is a complicated one, so any
Very
advice.
Yeah.
And then the final thing we're going to talk about are just like what you can put with it. Obviously, we know it really is just the guys in Cinderella. Like you don't see that much Bolt. And then like we talked about patches like Heatran and Screamtail, and then you could sometimes chuck a Hyper. Like this is probably more for the Specs version, but you can put some Hyper Offense pieces on it. And then obviously another big one's Redirection. I've seen Clef, I've seen Smeargle. What are your thoughts on the best partners out? Probably everyone knows Cinderella, but like what about what other partners would you sort of recommend?
Yeah, of course. Like the biggest thing is, like you said, real Intent is kind of your key pieces. I'd say you can't have a team without those two, or you have to have a pretty damn good reason to not run either one of them. But those are the big two. I'd say Ogerpon. Like I've seen a couple versions of Ogerpon. With not every version of Pagos having an Earth, you could run Water. A lot of people forget that Water is really good, just because we've had Earth for so long. You don't run both of them, but Water is usable. Fire is of course the most common one, and Rock is really good. A lot of people are sleeping on Rock. It also lets you run another Fire type. Like you said, like there are hyper offensive versions where you can run a piece like Chiyu. Chiyu could be okay. I think it's like a temporary Zama check. Definitely makes Lunala easier, which is a tough matchup. But yeah, I think the majority of the time your team's going to look something like two fake outs, some redirection, usually Ogerpon, like you said. If you want, you can use Clef or Smeargle, something like that. Amoonguss is usable. And then the last two slots are just going to be your patch slots. I think most commonly it'll be either Fluttermane as the fifth, or sometimes Screamtail. And the last one kind of has to... You kind of push deal with Zama. That slot has to deal with Zama. slot has to be okay to dozo. It has to be, like I think the really nice thing about Pagos is it's one of the only Pokemon where the four Pokemon that you bring are so like you bring them so often that your other two slots can pretty much do anything. And like you said, like if you feel like I'm not very good into Zama teams, you can change the slot into something that's a little bit stronger into Zama because unlike a lot of restricteds, you don't really have to worry about your sixth slot having impact outside of that specific matchup, right? Where something like Calyrex Shadow, because of the fact that it gets beat so easily with something like Double Dark, you're kind of forced your fifth and sixth slot to be something that assists your restricted because otherwise playing without one can be kind of annoying. So I think Pagos is unique in that your assisting partners can be whenever you as a player find the toughest to deal with. Yeah, I think the building's pretty standard now. Like it's usually Incinerilla, Ogerpon, and then your fills. Usually Fluttermane, and then the last slot can be usually Ursh. Chi was as a suggestion. Heatran is a suggestion. But yeah, like other than that, like very I said linear. Like this is the word I've been using the whole time, but it's pretty linear.
Yeah,
you want to,
like it's been figured out, but it's just good.
Yeah.
That's it. Like yeah.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
you think a major win's coming? Like sort of a Western major win is coming for it? Do you think it's?
I think it's due.
Yeah.
I think it's due.
Yeah. Cool, man. And yeah, that concludes our Pagos Masterclass with Sempra. Thanks so much for joining, man. Any shout outs, any socials to plug, and then we will get out of here.
Yeah, my Twitter's Sempra with a Q at the end. SEMPRQ. That's my Twitter. I appreciate you having me on. It was fun to talk. Fun to yeah.
Yeah, thanks a lot for coming on, man. You can find me on Twitter and Twitch at as the Postman P. So twitch.tv/postmanp, Twitter or x.com now /postman P. Plenty more of these to come. So yeah, please like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And I will see you next time. Cheers.
Bye. See ya.